There are two new citizenship by investment programs coming, and they could be some of the most affordable in the market. Today, I'm going to share this breaking news and tell you if you may be a good fit for these two new citizenships. And it's been a while since we've seen an actual new citizenship by investment program. We were recently on the ground in Cairo, and we showed you Egypt's newly expanded CBI program. But these two programs could be some of the first new programs in a while. Citizenship by investment is where you make a donation or make some kind of qualifying investment like approved real estate, or even any real estate in the case of a country like Turkey, and in exchange you get a passport in a matter of months without having to move to the country or pay taxes there. You make an investment, they give you a passport. And so country number one is the Solomon Islands. They are now looking for final proposals to roll out a citizenship by investment program. It is not final, but they've come out and said, yes, we want to do this. They've been talking about it since 2020, and this is the closest that we've got. So the Solomon Islands is in the South Pacific. It is to the east of Papua New Guinea. It is a little bit northwest of Vanuatu, which is the only other country in that region and one of about a dozen countries that has citizenship by investment programs. I'm going to come back and make an important comparison to Vanuatu in a minute. What's interesting, though, is if we look at the visa-free travel, if you're looking for your first, second passport, you may want to focus a bit more on visa-free travel. I think it's often overrated. But let's say you're an American, and one day you may not want to be an American. Or now we're seeing French or Dutch or Germans or Canadians saying, I might not want to be my nationality at some point. You might want to have a little bit stronger second passport for the first one, and then you get to the second, third, fourth, plan C, D, E, F, G. That's when you look at a weaker passport like in Egypt, for example. And so the Solomon Islands has kind of a typical visa-free travel plan for a lot of these citizenship by investments. It's pretty weak in Latin America, which is one area where the Caribbean programs have gotten better. I got St. Lucian citizenship many years ago, and because I had a couple other citizenships at the time, I basically said, hey, St. Lucia was the most affordable and reputationally good program and all that fit in with what I already had, but it wasn't as strong in South America. The Caribbean programs have gotten better in kind of Latin America in general. The Solomon Islands has not. What the Solomon Islands does have is the relatively standard visa-free access to the Schengen area in Europe, as well as the UK and Ireland. So you can go most, but not all places in Europe. So you're missing Russia, for example, which a number of the Caribbean programs have now. Belarus, some of the Balkan countries like Serbia, that's one of the tougher countries in Europe to get into. Sometimes that's been a consideration for clients of ours. Do you want to look at this? Just the number of visa-free countries doesn't make a big difference. Solomon Islands is one of the several dozen, best passports in the world. You get good travel to Southeast Asia, so Malaysia's a pretty open country. That's where we host Nomad Capitalist Live. You can come and see our 4-day event with your Solomon Islands passport, and with most passports, it's a pretty open country. Europe and Southeast Asia are kind of the stronger spots. Here's what the Solomon Islands has, which I don't think they'll have for long if this proposal goes forward, and that's visa-free travel to Canada through what Canada has, the ETA program, similar to the US ESTA. And so we've seen in the last decade, St. Kitts and Nevis, which has a citizenship program in the Caribbean, tax-free country, and then Antigua and Barbuda, mostly tax-free country. When they really pushed citizenship by investment, Canada came in and said, yeah, we don't like that. So Justin Trudeau, the guy everybody in Canada is trying to get away from, has said on the record, hey, these programs, we're not so sure, there's irregularities. Bottom line is, Justin Trudeau doesn't like you living in his country as a Canadian if you're wealthy. They certainly don't like wealthy people who go through stringent background checks, as most of these programs have, coming in and visiting. So I would imagine if this goes through, Canada is going to suddenly have an epiphany to the Solomon Islands. So I wouldn't take that visa-free Canada. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people in the industry, oh, this is your path to Canada. You don't need to go out and get the $1 million, Malta MEAN program in 18 months. You can just, if you want to go to Canada, you can get through the Solomon Islands. It wasn't very long ago that Canada canceled the somewhat new visa-free access from Mexicans. They said, hey, we're doing this whole trade partnership thing. Hey, why don't you guys just come up and visit? Your country's becoming wealthier. You're not going to overstay. They canceled Mexico. So do not believe anybody in the industry who's going to tell you that you're going to be visa-free traveling to Canada as a Solomon Islands national for long. But overall, you've got visa-free access to well over 100 countries. Again, I mean, those primarily the ones that I mentioned. You know, to me, when I'm looking at a second passport like this is kind of a de rigueur, Tier B, we call it, citizenship by investment passport. Not the best, but not the worst. Not a bad travel document to have. You're not going to have to get a ton of visas. And if you want to go some of these other places, I mean, you know, you might go to Morocco once if you're just going on a holiday. It won't be that hard to get a visa. That's where you want to have a plan. You know, where do you live? You know, where are your home bases? This is the kind of thing that Nomad Capitalist helps our clients with. It's not just a matter of getting a passport and looking at a visa-free travel score. Lots of companies in the industry do that. We like to look a lot more holistically at the whole person. Everyone's using that word holistic these days, but you know, I actually believe in it. You want to understand the entire picture of your residence, your citizenship, your taxes, your investments, everything, and that's what you can do with us at nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Now, here's why this may be interesting, is the Caribbean countries, you had St. Lucia, you had Dominica, $100,000 passports. Well, they got together just very recently and said, well, you know, we're going to double the price. We're going to basically placate the European Union, even though we're doing very stringent background checks. I've been through it myself. I can tell you, they really check stuff. And you've got to be, generally speaking, of good character. Somebody might slip through the cracks eventually, or someone might become a problem after they get the citizenship, which who would know that in any country, whether it's naturalization or by investment. But they basically raised the price. Will the Solomon Islands come in with that 100,000, you know, 1XXX price? We have to see. If they do, I imagine there will be interest. Now, the other question will be, is next door in Vanuatu, they've had this really number of different programs over the years. I was in Vanuatu about 7 years ago at this point. They asked my opinion. I told them it's confusing. You got different programs. Obviously, since then, we've seen that the due diligence there was weak. And so Vanuatu lost visa-free access to the UK. And then it was the Schengen area. And then I guess Ireland decided to slip in under the radar. And so, you know, Vanuatu passport is good for living in tax-free Vanuatu. It's good for living off the grid. It's good for traveling to countries that are not in Europe. There's a decent number of countries you can travel to in the emerging world, but it's not what the average Westerner would consider a great passport. And that's because of those due diligence failures. The initial vibe I'm getting from the Solomon Islands is being more in the camp of more stringent due diligence, proper due diligence, having quality people come on. That's kind of what I've always thought when I see them talking about this over the last couple of years. But that remains to be seen. Vanuatu is tightening things up. They are requiring in-person interviews now. This process always becomes more expensive. It always becomes more intrusive. So if you want to get your second passport, that's when you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply and say, I'm just going to do this now and be ready. That is the situation in the Solomon Islands. Good passport, not the best. The price will dictate it. Let's see how relations with Europe go in order to keep that quality passport. Are they going to entirely follow the Caribbean model, have a $200,000 price floor? If they do that, I don't see the value. If they say, hey, we're going to put an offering out there at a similar price point to Vanuatu, somewhere in the low to mid 100,000s, and we're going to do more stringent due diligence, then I see that being interesting, as long as you stay away from people who are going to pitch the Canada part to you. So that's the first program. The second program is one being proposed by a presidential candidate in West Africa. Ghana, he says, should raise $50 billion by selling a $50,000 CBI program where people can get citizenship. And he's pitching this to the USA, not the United States that you know, but the United States of Africa. It's an interesting point. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, whether this program sees the light of day. I'm going to tell you why that could be interesting and how you can use that in a moment. But an independent presidential candidate in Ghana has said, hey, let's bring in some cash and let's target people of African ancestry. This kind of, hey, come back to your homeland by paying $50,000 and getting citizenship. Now, obviously, we've helped people get citizenship by descent. That's often in European countries, sometimes in Caribbean and Latin American countries, very, very rarely in Asian countries, but it is possible in a handful of cases. And that's where you go back through your family tree. Where did your ancestors come from? Get that passport. They don't charge you a fee other than just the general, filing fees and anyone like our help. So the idea that someone's going to pay $50,000 just to kind of reconnect with their roots, I don't know that that's going to work. And all these numbers they throw out, $50 billion, that's crazy. I mean, they're not going to sell that many passports, okay, believe me. But this presidential candidate known as Cheddar, he's got a 12-point vision for Africa, and among that is bringing these people in $50,000. So if we pull up the visa-free travel map for Ghana, I can tell you it's not great. Now, we have seen bad follow-through from these mid-five-figure programs. 6-7 years ago, Armenia was pitched on having a $50,000 CBI. Before that, I actually went through the Comoros program. It was $45,000. I said, we'll probably never see a passport program like that again, because we talked about Asia's citizenship by investment. Cambodia, it's more expensive than the Caribbean because of the ability to own land and do business there. I'm not sure that we're going to see a $50,000 CBI, but that's probably a reasonable price point for a passport where you can basically travel to other places in West Africa as well as in East Africa. So there's a handful of Caribbean islands, for example. You've got Nicaragua, Bolivia, even Malaysia. Ghanese citizens can't come. That's one of the most open countries in the world. So if you're Ghanese, and that's your only passport, you need a visa to come to Nomad Capitalist Live. Now, applying for visas is not always the kiss of death, but this is not really going to be a passport that you could rely on to say, hey, at some point, this could be my only working passport. What is interesting, though, when he says the United States of Africa is, we've been talking for a couple of years how the African Union is increasingly looking to bring countries of Africa together. I saw one country recently that's opened up their visa policy to all African citizens. And so if you look at business opportunities as Asia becomes more and more middle class, Africa is more slowly becoming middle class. And so that could be a frontier market, an emerging market investment hub. It could also be a place that, as you're seeing a lot of the countries in Africa push back on France, push back on Western rule, people who want an alternative, people who want a safe place to go in times of chaos, there are some countries that are very livable in Africa, and if you have an African passport and the African Union expands over time, that could open up certain residence rights, as we have in the European Union, or as you have in CARICOM, which the Caribbean citizenship programs are part of. You have, obviously, West Africa, the ECOWAS region, but then you have the Greater African Union. And so I think that there's more and more talk about let's get all of Africa to come together. And from an investment point of view and from a contrarian place to be point of view, in times of chaos in the Western world, I think both of those could be reasons to look at this. Now, is Ghana going to actually follow through this program? I would put the odds of it relatively low. So let's see. If a $50,000 program comes out and you have any interest, I would just do it. You want to understand, how does that impact your banking? How does it impact everything that you do? You want to have someone take that holistic view at it. But I think a program like that rarely gets introduced, and if it is introduced, it's not going to last for long. What could be potentially more interesting is the Solomon Islands. We'll look at the price point in that. But here's the bottom line. I mean, these programs get more expensive over time. We've helped clients for years get these programs. It's becoming a little bit more laborious process. I think we have the best approach of helping people navigate the paperwork, avoid a lot of the pitfalls of these programs. If you want to learn what we do to help people, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We'd be happy to help you. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest news, that's when you come to Nomad Capitalist Live. So make sure you have a passport you can use to get into Malaysia visa-free, and you can join us for our 4-day event.